All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. And today we are in our second week of class, and our syllabus tells us that we are going to look at the Jewish expectations for the Messiah. Of course, in a class on the life of Jesus, it's not just Jesus, but it's the life of Jesus Christ. And we talked a little bit last week on what that title Christ means. We talked about how it's a title, it's not Jesus' last name. Christ, of course, means the anointed king. And if you are the king, then you are the king of a kingdom. So it's important to understand what that actually means and how there were hundreds of years of buildup and development and anticipation and expectation regarding that particular figure before Jesus was born. So I'll give you an example of how this sort of builds up before we kind of get officially started. So in the New Testament, first book, Matthew, begins by saying this in Matthew 1:1. It says, "The record of the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David and the son of Abraham." So it begins by saying that Jesus is the Messiah. In Greek, it's a little bit more specific. It's Yesu Christou right there. You can see there if you can read Greek. And so it actually uses the noun Christ. And then it gives two particular titles to this messianic figure. They say that he is the son of David and he is the son of Abraham. And it doesn't define those titles. It doesn't tell you what son of David means or son of Abraham means. It assumes that you already know what those titles mean. Now, if you're a modern reader and you come to Matthew and you don't know what those titles mean, then you're already lost. You're already not connecting with what the writer is saying. The writer assumes that his readers know these titles. And the reason why he can do that is because everyone in that culture that was a pious Jewish reader knew exactly what it meant to be the son of David and a son of Abraham. And of course, they also knew what it meant to be the Christ, the Messiah. And we talked about that last week with Psalm 2. But what I wanted to do today in our lectures, I got two lectures today, is to look at the Old Testament to kind of fill in that background, to give us that foundation so we understand what these titles mean and the associations that came with it. And this way, whenever we read within the Gospels, within these ancient biographies of the life of Jesus, we can see that when Jesus makes claims to be the Messiah, and when people ask him whether he's the Messiah, and when people believe in him as the Messiah, we know what that term means because we know everything that's been built up into that particular term. So that's what we're doing with today's course. So it's foundation and background, but it's important background because if we don't know what those terms mean, then we just don't know what's going on. We don't know what is being said about Jesus. Because remember, this class is not just the life of Jesus, it's the life of Jesus Christ. We have to know what that term means. So that's what we're doing in today's lecture. Now, it's understood that Jesus is a savior and a delivering figure. People actually refer to him as Lord and Savior. And this, of course, indicates that he is saving people from something. He is a deliverer, and as a deliverer, he is delivering people from something. Well, what is it that Jesus is saving people from and delivering people from? Well, again, that's part of the job description of this messianic figure, and we'll look a little bit at that today. So we need to begin in the beginning. So we're going to basically be working through a bunch of Old Testament passages today. So and I'll take notes on the side of the things that I think are are important and noteworthy. Let me make sure that I actually have a big enough font there so that everyone can see 18. 18's pretty big. Okay. Okay. So maybe you're familiar with the opening story of creation. In Genesis chapter 1, we have a story of creation. It is set in a very interesting poetic arrangement, and there are 7 days of creation, and each day a different part of the heavens and the earth and all that those contain within it uh, are created. So we have uh, day one, day two, day three, day four, day five, and then when we get to day six, we have humanity created. Humanity is not created on day one, humanity is created on day six. But it's very interesting how humanity is described. So in Genesis 1:27, it says that God created man. This is not male, but God created humanity. God created humanity in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. And then in verse 28, it says that God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. And here's the important part. Here's the important thing. And subdue it and rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Okay. And so we see that even though humanity is not created on day one, humanity's basically created last. It's the last thing that's created. Humanity is created, but it is given the function to rule over everything that God has already created. So you could see there that, and I'll put this here, um, humanity, we'll just put here, Adam and Eve, um, created to rule over all of God's creation. Okay. And I should, I guess, well, I'm not going to put well, let's do that. We can put the passage there. Genesis 1:27 through 28. And you can see kind of like the three levels of the dominion that humanity originally possesses. So they're over the birds of the sea. That's kind of like the lower level. Sorry, excuse me, the fish of the sea, excuse me. The birds of the sky, that's the high level. And then every living thing that moves on the earth, that's the middle level. So kind of like heaven and earth and under the earth, all three of those levels are given. Like God actually gives that dominion and shares it with humanity. There's a sense to which humanity is actually created to rule over, to subdue um, everything that God has already created, even though humanity is created last. And this is a big deal. It's very important. It sets human beings apart from everything else that God has created, and it gives them purpose. It gives them value. Um, Now, you can look around the world today and you can see pretty clearly that humanity has not done a very good job at stewarding God's creation. So, when we talk about the saving and the delivering responsibility that the Jewish Messiah is supposed to have, one of those things is that the Messiah is supposed to be someone who regains the position and the vocation that was given to Adam. Adam was to rule over God's creation. That role has been lost, or it's been performed not very well. And so the Messiah, as a king who's going to rule over a kingdom, is naturally going to rule over um, the dominion that humanity was originally promised. Okay. It's very interesting. I mean, this is like the most important part of Genesis chapter 1, and it gets left out of a lot of readings. Okay. So, but as you are very likely aware of, the good times for Adam and Eve do not last very long. Within a few chapters, they begin to disobey God and they sin and they eat from the tree from which they are not supposed to eat. And instead of the fact that God, as we see here, God blesses them, we actually see a curse that actually takes place. Okay, so let me actually move down. Um, look at a couple of these passages here. Okay, so Genesis 3:16. This is after they had sinned and eaten from the tree, and of course Eve shared the fruit with her husband Adam. It's also interesting too that those names, those are actually symbolic names. Adam in Hebrew means humanity, and Eve means life. So you have a figure that is the symbolism of humanity, and you have this mother figure that's a symbolism of life. So, and any Hebrew reader would know that immediately. That's not very clear to English readers. So, so this is the curse that God actually gives to uh, to Adam and Eve. So in Genesis 3:16, to the woman, God said, I will greatly multiply your pain and childbirth. In pain, you will bring forth children, yet your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Then to Adam, God said, because you've listened to the voice of your wife, Adam should have listened to the voice of God, and you've eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil, you will eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall grow for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you will eat bread till you return to the ground, because from it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And so we can see here that it's not just humanity that's cursed. We also see that the earth and the ground is also cursed. Okay. And, God had blessed all of creation, everything that God had created, including human beings, were originally blessed. And so what we could see from, I'm just going to put Genesis chapter 3, which is that God cursed humanity and the earth. And so here's the logic of the opening chapters of Genesis. If God blesses something, then it is good. It is useful for God's purposes. It is holy. It is set in order. It is usable for the intended reason for which it was created. Okay. If it's cursed, then something is wrong with it. Now, how do you fix a curse? How do you fix a curse? Well, it needs to be blessed again. Okay. And so the logic of the rest of Genesis is that um, creation is undergoing this curse and it needs to be blessed again. And how is God going to redeem not just humanity, but the entirety of the earth, all of the land also needs to be redeemed. And that's really important. And the rest of Genesis is going to tell us how that's going to take place. Now, we don't have time to read these, but in the other chapters of what's kind of called the primeval history, those chapters are Genesis 4 through 11. 4 through 11, we can see the effects of the fall and the curse. In Genesis chapter 4, the children of Adam and Eve, or at least their descendants, we have Cain and Abel. One of them actually murders the other one. Okay. In Genesis chapter 6, which is a little bit controversial, but it seems that there are these supernatural beings. They're called the sons of God. Um, they were interpreted by early Jews and by early Christians as angels. We actually learned that they take for themselves human wives. So we have cohabitation between angels and human beings, and God is not appreciative of that. We also see that there is a massive amount of sinful behavior in the earth, and God has to cast judgment on those people by flooding the earth and by saving a handful of people. That was, of course, Noah and his three sons, and Noah's wife and his three sons' wives, so 8 people. They, of course, were on the ark that Noah built. Um, Now, after the flood ended, there are other issues because Noah gets drunk, and there are some questionable acts and deeds, questionable behavior between Noah and one of his sons. We're not exactly sure what the Hebrew means on that, but what we do know is that it is intended to be very bad. And then we get in chapter 10 and 11, particularly in chapter 11, that humanity wants to make a name for itself. It's this prideful, arrogant, let's make a name for ourselves. And so they build this tower, the Tower of Babel, They build it all the way up to the heavens. And of course, God says, no, that's not good. And of course, God divides the people by giving them many languages, making it difficult for them to understand. So basically, we have at the beginning of Genesis, God creating human beings and giving them this really important role and blessing them. And then we see in Genesis chapter 3, humanity sinning, and we see that humanity is cursed, but also the earth is cursed. And then we can see the effects of the curse with all those things that we talked about there from Genesis 4 through 11. So finally, we get in Genesis chapter 12 to the beginning of the solution. The beginning of the solution. So God calls a particular person, and his name is Abram. Okay. Now remember here, as you see the capital LORD, as we see here in the text, capital LORD, that is a reference to you to indicate that that is the proper name for the God of Israel. And his name is Yahweh. I'll actually write that down here. Yahweh. Okay. Yahweh is where you have the capital LORD. Okay. So God's name, of course, is not Lord, but you could say the Lord. But for me, what I'll do is I'm just gonna say the name of God at that particular point, just to really just get that emphasis there for you, so we can recognize what's taking place. Okay, so now Yahweh said to Abram, "Go forth from your country, and from your relatives, and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing." Okay. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you, I will curse. And in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. So we got a lot of blessing language there. That's very interesting. So here in Genesis 12, 1 through 3, we can see God summons Abram. Okay. By the way, later in the story, Abram gets his name changed to Abraham. Same person, but just gets a different name. And we see that the plan that God has is that God is going to fix the curse of the world and the curse of humanity by using humanity to bring about God's blessing. So we saw there in verse 2 that God is going to bless Abram, and he himself, Abram, is going to be a blessing. But the key thing here is here in 12 verse 3, in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. Okay. And remember, blessing is the way to undo the curse. Abraham has a mission to undo and to redeem humanity from the curse that was given to Adam and Eve. That's very important. Very important. Okay. That's how the blessing and curse language works. Okay. It's not just this general sense that, hey, I'm going to bless you, as in like I'm going to show favor to you and good things are going to happen. The blessing undoes the curse from Genesis chapter 3. Okay. But notice it's not just Abram who's going to do it. It's he's going to have a large family. He's going to have many descendants, and in Abraham, as in like in him and through his descendants, all the families of the earth are going to be blessed. And so we have to remember that we saw at the beginning of Matthew chapter 1 that Jesus is the son of Abraham. So what would it mean for Jesus to be the son of Abraham? Well, the son of Abraham was meant to be the person that was to bring about the blessing to the entire world. And the blessing is meant to undo the curse of Adam, to redeem humanity. But again, not just humanity, because humanity wasn't the only thing that was cursed. All of creation was cursed. And so the son of Abraham is to redeem humanity and to redeem all of creation. Okay, very important. Okay, so I'll note that here. The blessing of Abraham is to undo the curse of Adam, okay, for humanity and all creation. Okay, so it's again very, very, very important. Okay, um, and I should also put here that Abraham is promised a worldwide family. Okay. So, as we continue through Genesis, we learn that the story is going to be how God continues to use Abraham and his descendants to bring about his redemptive purposes. Okay. And if you're not familiar with the family line of Abraham, we should go over just some of the basics. Okay. We're not going to talk about all the descendants and all the brothers and that sort of stuff. That we're going to kind of focus on the important ones. Okay. So we have Abraham. Okay. He has two sons, but for our focus now, we'll focus on Isaac. Okay. Isaac has two sons, but for our purposes, we're going to focus on Jacob. What you do need to know is that Jacob, like Abram, gets his name changed. Excuse me. So just as Abram gets his name changed to Abraham, Jacob gets his name changed to Israel. Okay. So this is where when we talk about the children of Israel, these are or the Israelites. They are the ones that they descend from Jacob slash Israel. Okay. Now, um, Jacob has 12 sons. Okay. And one of these sons, okay, is Judah. Okay. Where actually the Jewish people actually derive their name. Okay. You'll notice that that in the Old Testament, the it's appropriate to call the people the children of Israel or the Israelites, but it's not until the Babylonian exile we saw last week, the Babylonian exile, when Nebuchadnezzar II came from Babylon and conquered the Israelites, took over their land, destroyed the temple, and temporarily halted the Davidic kingship. When they went into exile, that is the point to where the Jewish people that are trying to maintain their identity, they began to call themselves and to be referred to as Jews, which in Greek is just the Judeans. And that derives, by the way, from this name Judah. Okay, so we're learning kind of where these names come from. Okay, so all right, now what's interesting about Judah is that the promise is that um, there's there's going to be a king. There's going to be someone who is going to function as this monarch, this royal figure, and the promise is actually made that that king is going to come from Judah's tribe. Okay, the 12 sons of Jacob are going to function as the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, so you just make sure that we got all these things. We got Abraham. He has a son named Isaac. He has a son named Jacob slash Israel. Okay, and then he has a son named Judah. Okay, so Judah is the great grandson of Abraham. So now, uh, many of you know that that parents, when they die, they usually leave a will, and during their will, they pass on uh, their possessions to their children. Okay, but in their culture, what they would do is they would have a kind of a testament, which is the father on their deathbed would summon all their children and would say what their children are going to inherit. And so there's an interesting story here in Genesis 49 to where you can see here Genesis 49 verse 1. Jacob summoned his sons and said, "Assemble yourselves that I might tell you what will befall you in the days to come." Okay. And so what we're interested in is this person of Judah. Okay. So so here is something that's very interesting. Okay. Very important. Okay. So I'm going to focus this here. Genesis 49, 8 through 10. Okay. So look, what does Jacob tell Judah? Jacob says, "Your brothers will praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you." Okay. So we're going to see that that Judah is worthy of worship. And here's something that's very interesting. And we've talked about this last week when we talked about Psalm 2. In our culture today, when you think who is worthy of worship, you think only God is worthy of worship. But that's not the way it was in the ancient culture. Okay, certainly they would worship God, or if you were a pagan, you would worship a lot of gods. But you could also worship qualified human beings. Now, by worshiping a qualified human being, that doesn't mean that that human being was God. When Jacob here says that Judah, that your father's sons are going to bow down to you, that's an act of worship. They're not saying that Judah obviously is God. They're just saying that he is someone who is worthy of worship. Okay, so worship was a much more flexible term in the ancient world. That's important for us to know. Let's move on. Verse 9. Judah is a lion's whelp. Okay. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He couches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who dares rouse him up. Okay. So we can see that he is likened unto a lion figure, which basically just means he's a warrior figure. Okay. He's a warrior figure. Okay. And then in verse 10, we have uh, a very interesting point. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. Then we have this phrase here, which you might notice in your translation. It might say something different. This phrase, "until Shiloh comes." There's some difficult Hebrew, and we're not exactly sure what that means for sure. But we do know is the next line is pretty clear. It says, "And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples." So this is the important part, is that Judah is promised the kingship. Okay, that's what it means. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. Okay, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. So he is going to have the kingship. He's going to possess a king, and there's going to be obedience from all the peoples. Okay, not just the children of Israel. Okay, from all the peoples. So all peoples will give obedience to this king. Okay, so that's very important. Okay, so of course you can read the rest of those latter chapters in Genesis, and you can see Jacob giving his the promised inheritance to the other sons, and none of them are described with this sort of royal language, this kingly language. Okay, and so what happens is that the Israelites would understand that if they were going to have a king, a legitimate king, then that king needed to descend from Judah's tribe. Is very important. Okay, and lots of other tribes. There was the tribe of Benjamin, but the descendants of Benjamin could not claim to be the rightful king. Okay, in order to be the king, you had to qualify, and the qualification is that you had to be a descendant from Judah. Okay, very important. Okay, if anyone has any questions or whatever, just of course raise your hand, or you can interrupt me. But this is going to be very, very important. Okay, so let's look here. Here's we're gonna skip ahead in the history of Israel. Okay, so we're going to move to the time of the monarchy. Okay, because through the history of Israel, we know that they had the children of Israel were slaves in Egypt, and then they were redeemed by Moses. They eventually come to the promised land, and in the promised land, they don't have kings. They just have a bunch of regional judges. Okay. But eventually the people say, hey, we want to have a king. And after some problematic times with a guy named Saul, they eventually bring about another king, and the other king is David. Okay. David is one of the most important kings, I think. The name David is apart from the name of God, is the most cited name in the Old Testament. He's a very, very influential figure. Okay, now David is a descendant of Judah. Okay, so David is one of the appropriate kings, and in 2 Samuel 7, we have what is called the Davidic covenant. Okay, and I cannot stress this to you enough. 2 Samuel 7 is probably the most influential chapter in all of the Old Testament for Jewish messianic thought. I'll say that again. 2 Samuel chapter 7 2 Samuel 7 is the most influential chapter when it comes to the development of messianic thought and messianic expectation. Okay, when you read commentaries on 2 Samuel 7, they will point out that this is an extremely important chapter that has impacted much of the thought about the coming Messiah. So in this particular chapter, we have what is called the Davidic covenant. Okay, all right, and so the stipulations of the covenant are as we are going to see. It's very important. Okay, so this is God is speaking right now. He's speaking to David. I mean, he's speaking through a prophet. But what we're going to see is that God is telling David something about the children that David is going to have. Okay. All right. So this is what's going on. So starting here in verse 12, it says, "When your days are complete, and when you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your descendant after you, who will come forth from you, and I will establish his kingdom." Okay. So one of the things that we see, the first part of the Davidic covenant, is that we see that he is promised a kingdom. Makes sense. He's a king. Okay. Verse 13. Okay. "He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever." Okay. All right. So we can also see here that he is promised a house. And what this house means is a dynasty. Okay. We talk about the house of David. Or I don't know, there's lots of other modern TV shows that talk about a house, and a house it implies the family tree of a dynasty of a famous family. Okay. So there's going to be David's going to have a long line of descendants that are going to be built through, of course, David's sons. Okay. Um, there's a little bit of a pun here on the house, because one of the things that David wanted to do is that David wanted to build God a temple. And God said, "Nope, you can't build a temple because, David, you're a warrior and your hands have blood on it. You can't do that. So instead of you building me a house, God says that I'm going to make sure that you have a house." And so here is that sort of the pun on the house there. What is interesting, though, is that the first king that came forth from David, who is Solomon, he actually did build
I
a
have a question.
house. Oh, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Uh, if God did not allow David to build the temple because he had blood on his hand, but wasn't God that told him to kill people? Like if God told him to kill people in his name, why now he's saying he's not allowed to build the temple?
Yeah. The sense is that the house of God is meant to be an extremely holy place, for God to actually come down and to actually live there in the temple, and that the sense of holiness was very sacred, and it was meant to be protected. And so just God just wanted to make sure that the person who was doing that was someone that was not involved with bloodshed. And so just, I guess he wanted someone with clean hands, per se. So I get your point that, yeah, certainly God did authorize David to participate in those battles. That is absolutely true. Um, but again, this is just how the story comes out to us. David wants to do this. God says, "No, your descendant, your son is going to do this. Is going to build this house."
It's
So
not so it's not a punishment. It's a punishment.
I don't think it's a punishment.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, there are negative things that are said about David, because he's not a perfect figure, but this is not, I think, intended to be a punishment. So there's a house, there's a dynasty, but of course the house also is understood to be a literal house, as in a temple. Okay, but we can also see, you can see there that I will establish the throne of his kingdom throne forever. Okay, so the throne is going to last forever. And then we get here in verse 14, something that's very, very, very important. Okay. "I will be a father to him. he will be a son to me. Okay? So, if God is the father of this king, we're going to call this guy the Davidic king. Guess what he is? He is the son of God. Okay? Because God is his father, he's going to be my son. Okay? Or we saw this in 2 Samuel 7. We saw that when God installs the king on Zion, um, God says that you are my son. You are the Son of God. Son of God is a title for the Messianic king. And here is the other significant passage in the Old Testament that makes that point. We can see that the king that is going to descend from David, who is going to possess a kingdom, he's going to have a dynasty, and he's going to have a throne forever. He is going to be the Son of God. Okay, God is going to give that title to him. Okay. All right. And when we skip down to verse 16, we are reiterated with the three parts. Your house and your kingdom shall endure before me forever. Your throne shall be established forever. So all three of the aspects of the Davidic covenant, as we noted here. You see, kingdom, house, and throne. How long are they going to last? They're going to last forever. Okay. So 2 Samuel 7 roughly happens around 1000 BCE. Okay. Remember that at the Babylonian exile in 587, so we're talking centuries later, we see that the kingship gets temporarily suspended, and that's important. That's important to realize how that functions. And so for all of those years, the Jews are looking for the resumption of the kingship. They need a king. They need their own king who can rule their own kingdom. But that king, you see, has some qualifications. He has to be a descendant of Judah, and he has to be a descendant of David. That is extremely important. I mean, this is a covenant that God makes to David. You know, is that you're going to have. I'm sorry.
Hello, sir. Good morning.
Sorry for late.
Okay. Good
Sorry,
morning.
sorry for late you am.
That's okay. We're in the middle of our
Sorry.
recording right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and mute you so we can keep going.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So that's important. So again, 2 Samuel 7 is one of the most important passages that indicates the role of this coming messianic figure. When someone claims to be the son of David, he is someone that is promised a kingdom that's going to last forever. He's going to be someone that establishes a dynasty that's going to last forever. But potentially someone who is going to be a builder of God's house, and someone who's going to sit on David's throne. And that's really important. The throne of David is geographically specific. Where was David's throne? That throne was in Jerusalem. Okay, very important. Okay, that's where David's throne was in Jerusalem, very clear, and that throne was promised forever. Okay, so again, this happens around 1000 BC, and for all of those years, we have a descendant of David occupy the throne, and he has a son that occupies the throne, and he has a son that occupies the throne. And it goes all the way down until we get to Hezekiah at the Babylonian exile, and then the Davidic kingship is temporarily suspended. Okay, so we have from that time nearly 500 plus years until the birth of Jesus, where the Jews are longing for someone to come from the line of David to resume the role as the king, someone who's going to rule over the kingdom. He's going to have a dynasty, and he's going to have the ability to occupy the throne in Jerusalem. So in your reading for this week, in your article on the son of David, you're going to see all these points, by the way. So I'm kind of give them to you ahead of time, and we will be able to review them in your reading for this week. So let's look at some of the promises that look forward to this messianic figure. Now that we have it all tied to David, we can move forward and we can see how that's going to function. So in the prophet Isaiah, okay, the prophet Isaiah, he gives one particular prophecy about this figure. Okay. Okay. All right. So it's also important to know for this particular prophecy that David has a father. Of course, David's father is Jesse. So we have this particular figure named Jesse. So the prophecy that Isaiah gives in Isaiah 11 verse 1. So I'll put here Isaiah 11 verse 1 says, "Then a shoot will spring forth from the stem of Jesse, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit." So we have the imagery here of a family tree, and we have something that is stemming off from this family tree. And again, of course, everyone knows that the person who was promised a dynasty that's going to last forever was David. Okay, so we all know that this is in reference to Jesse's son David. The verse goes on, the Spirit of Yahweh will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and strength, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of Yahweh. He will delight in the fear of Yahweh. He will not judge by what his eyes see, nor make a decision by what his ears hear. But with righteousness he will judge the poor. He will decide with fairness the afflicted of the earth, and he will strike down with the rod of his mouth, and the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Okay, so here in Isaiah 11, we see that there is a son of David. We're just going to say the son of Jesse, and let me kind of skip up and see what we have there. Yeah, and this descendant, we see that he is going to judge. And by the way, judging doesn't just mean what we think today, to where a judge is someone who issues a bunch of verdicts and says someone is guilty, someone is innocent. A judge in the ancient culture was also a ruler. We have a book in the Old Testament called the Book of Judges, and those are people who are rulers. A judge is a ruler. So when someone is judging, he's also ruling. So it's this important word connection you need to make in your mind. Okay, so judging the poor means you're also ruling the poor. You see that he's functioning as someone who is judging. He is ruling effectively. He also defeats evil. It's right there. He will strike down with the rod of his mouth the wicked. He's going to slay the wicked. He's going to defeat evil. We also see someone that he is empowered by the Spirit of God. We saw get two verses to where it talked about how this is someone who the Spirit rests on this king. The king is going to be empowered by God to rule and to judge effectively. Okay, but the key thing there is that he is intended to be a descendant of David. And during the time of the Babylonian exile, of course, there's all this anxiety over when are we going to get our king back? When are we going to have a king that's going to rule over our people? And the prophets address that. So one of the other prophets that addresses that is the prophet Jeremiah, who actually his prophetic ministry occurs during the time of the Babylonian exile. So in Jeremiah 23, verse 5, we have an interesting passage. Jeremiah 5. Okay. So this is what the prophet says. He says, "Behold, days are coming, declares Yahweh, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch. He will reign as king and act wisely and do justice and righteousness in the land." Okay. So we could see here the promise of the restoration of the Davidic kingship. Okay. Specifically, we could see here, notice the imagery of the family tree. God's going to raise up for David, and that means I'm going to put this person on the scene. I'm going to raise up for David this righteous branch. You know, it's an offshoot. It's a son of David, and there's the imagery here of a branch. That's important. And what's he going to do? He's going to reign as king. Okay. And he's going to do justice and righteousness in the land. Okay, that's clear. So you can see that the promise is needed to encourage the people that have longed for this particular king, and that's extremely important. The prophecy actually shows up again in Jeremiah a little bit later in chapter 33. Let's go to verse 15. You'll see the language is very similar. Okay, so we're moving fairly quickly here, but we have the notes, so you can go back and you can refer to these at your leisure. So a little bit later, Jeremiah 33:15 says, "In those days and at that time, I, God speaking, will cause a righteous branch of David to spring forth, and he shall execute justice and righteousness on the earth." We saw all that language earlier. Okay. And it says, "In those days, Judah will be saved. Jerusalem will dwell in safety. This is the name by which she," that's personification of Jerusalem, "she will be called. Yahweh is our righteousness." And then in verse 17, it says, "For thus says Yahweh, David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel." Okay. So again, all these make sense because we've seen the Davidic covenant in 2 Samuel 7. Okay. So again, we have the promise of restoration. So we have the restoration of the kingship. Okay. We have a son of David. Okay. And again, he's called a branch. Okay. And then we have the promise here. First of all, he's going to rule. He's going to rule well. And David will not lack a man upon his throne. Okay. So the reassurance there is that the throne will be occupied. It will be from a descendant of David. And, that restoration is going to be complete. Because remember, the throne was promised to David's descendants forever. And so we can see how that language works. Okay. Now, after the break, we'll come back and we're going to look at the Psalms, because the Psalms in particular address a lot of these Davidic topics. But I want to move ahead and I want to look at another passage from the book of Daniel, okay? Because Daniel chapter 7 gives another image that was understood almost universally to be a reference to the Messiah, okay? And we'll see why that is. Now, Daniel is a little bit different from the traditional prophets. What do I mean by a traditional prophet? A traditional prophet, think of someone like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. Those are traditional prophets in the sense that they receive the word of the Lord. They constantly talk about, said, the word of the Lord, the oracle of the Lord came to me, and then they speak forth the word of the Lord. Okay, that's how they work, and that's how they function. Okay, they speak forth the words of God. Daniel is different because Daniel receives dreams and visions, and these visions have a lot of imagery that are involved in them. And Daniel, as a prophet, interprets these visions, often with the help of a heavenly visitor, usually an angel that comes and helps to explain what these visions actually mean. So he's different from the other prophets. He's not a word of the Lord came to me prophet. He's a visionary, dreaming prophet that interprets these visionary events, often with the help and the assistance of an angelic visitor. Okay, so that's why Daniel is different. All right, so this passage is a little bit complicated because of the nature of the imagery that's being used, but I'll do the best to kind of explain what's going on. Okay, so we get at the beginning of this passage. Let me kind of scroll down, make sure we got room to type. Daniel is also someone in his story that is portrayed as being in Babylonian captivity. So this time period is framed during the 6th century BCE. During that time, 587, that's the 6th century BCE. So it says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions in his mind as he lay on his bed. and he wrote the dream down and related the following summary of it. So you can see here, this is how the vision actually takes place. And it's a long passage. We don't have time to look at everything. But we do need to look at the important parts of it. The first one is in verse 13. Okay. Excuse me. This is what Daniel says. He says, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming, and he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. Okay. So here we have a figure called the Son of Man. Okay. The Son of Man, what does he do? He comes on the clouds of heaven. Okay. The Son of Man approaches this other figure called the Ancient of Days. What does the Ancient of Days means? It means the really old guy, the Ancient One of Days. It's the ancient person. Okay. So most people, I think, rightly interpret the Ancient of Days as a reference to God. Okay. So we have the Ancient of Days. And so when someone comes and presents themselves before the Ancient of Days, you get the sense of someone coming before kind of a royal king. So God here is kind of functioning as the king. But look at what happens in verse 14. This is very important. Okay. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom. And then it gives a purpose that all the peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. So you can see why many Jews would look at this Son of Man figure and start to say, oh, he looks like a Messiah figure because he's promised dominion and kingship. And we see that his dominion and his kingdom are never going to be destroyed. They're not going to pass away. They're going to last forever. Just like we see the kingdom that is promised to the descendant of David. So the Jews would very easily connect this Son of Man figure with the Messiah. But what's interesting here, so we have the Son of Man who approaches the Ancient of Days, and it says in verse 14, and to him was given, as in to the Son of Man was given by God. God is the one that gave this to him. So what do you see here? And it's really important. God gives to the Son of Man three things. One, dominion. Okay. But whose dominion is it? Dominion is it? Well, if God is giving the dominion to the Son of Man, then it's God's dominion, right? Okay. Number two, if the Ancient of Days is giving to the Son of Man glory, whose glory is that? It's God's glory. Okay. And we also see the word kingdom, God's kingdom. Okay. All right. Now, in the midst of this empowering of this Son of Man figure with God's dominion, God's glory, and God's kingdom, which is not insignificant, we can see that the purpose of this is not just for, a few Israelites or a few Jews to serve him. It's all the peoples, all the nations, and people of every language would serve him. So there's going to be worldwide worship of the Son of Man. Okay. And of course, we can see the kingdom last forever. Very clear. Okay. So very, very, very important point there. We have a human figure. That's basically what it means to be a son of man. A human figure that is promised dominion, glory, and kingship. And then all the peoples are ultimately going to serve this Son of Man figure. And so it was very clear that was understood as a messianic type figure. Now, as the vision continues, it says, as for me, Daniel, my spirit was distressed within me, and my visions in my mind kept alarming me. Let me make sure, by the way, that I put the right verses, 13 through 14. I approached one of those who were standing by and began asking him the exact meaning of all of this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. So this is Daniel approaching one of these heavenly visitors and saying, hey, explain to me what these things mean. Help me understand these things. And so the angel gives interesting interpretation to these particular points. Okay. And what we actually learn is something that's very important. Okay. So this is going to be Daniel 7:18. Okay. When the angel interprets the Son of Man, the Son of Man is not interpreted as a single figure. The singular Son of Man is interpreted as the saints of the highest one will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever for all the ages to come. Okay. So we learned the Son of Man is a single figure who represents who? He represents the saints of the highest one. The word for saints just basically means the holy ones. Okay. The holy ones or the holy people. Okay. Who's holy people? Well, the people of the highest one. So it's the holy ones or the holy people of God. Okay. So we learn that the Son of Man isn't understood as a representative figure of the people of God. Okay, that's important. Now, we also learn a little bit later in Daniel that the people of God are people that are persecuted, and so that's going to be important. We see the people of God are persecuted, but we also see that the Son of Man is ultimately vindicated and receives dominion, glory, and kingship. So that's important. So again, the Son of Man is also this this title that Jesus likes to use for himself. He actually likes to talk about himself as the Son of Man. But we can see the importance of that particular title here in this passage. So we've seen quite a bit about this messianic figure. Okay, remember, as we saw here in Matthew 1:1, that Jesus is the Messiah. He is the Christ, means he's the anointed king, and he's the son of David and the son of Abraham. Okay, so now we have some better understanding as to what these things mean. What does it mean to be the son of David? Well, the son of David is the person that is promised three things in particular. He is promised a kingdom that's going to last forever. He's promised a dynasty that's going to last forever. And he's promised a throne in Jerusalem that's going to last forever. Okay? And I can tell you, you can go to Jerusalem right now in the year 2023, and there is no Jew that is occupying the throne of David. Okay? That promise has not yet been fulfilled. And from the perspective of the first century, that promise had still not been fulfilled. Okay? We also see that he is the son of Abraham. And remember, the children of Abraham were to be the people through whom God was going to bless the world. And it's important to remember that blessing the world is to undo the curse of Adam's sin. Blessing undoes the curse. And so you can see that the Messiah, who is going to be ruling the world, actually regains the vocation that Adam was originally promised. Remember that Adam in Genesis chapter 1 was promised to subdue and to rule over all of God's creation. What is the Messiah supposed to do? He's supposed to have dominion and glory and kingship. All the peoples are going to worship him. He's going to have a throne that's going to last forever, and his rule is going to last forever. The Messiah is effectively the second Adam. He is the Adam figure that was intended from the beginning.